Right now, you're cozy without lifting a finger. Your thermostat hums quietly in the background, and a thick coat hangs by your door, crafted without you ever taking a life. Your kitchen pantry is stocked with food that won't spoil next week, no matter how deep the freeze gets outside. Now, vanish. All of it. Now, vanish all of it. For millennia, that wasn't a rare disaster. It was everyday reality. Across hundreds of thousands of years, our forebears endured endless ice ages, where massive glaciers swallowed whole continents, and a couple of hours in the open meant death. Yet somehow, they pushed through. You are living proof. Every single ancestor in your chain survived long enough to pass the torch down to you. That means every last one of them claimed a victory against a winter with zero margin for error. So how on earth did they pull it off? How does a frail, hairless primate, forged in the tropical African heat, survive the most punishing cold Earth ever unleashed? That's the story today. A harrowing tale of human resilience, where one misstep meant total extinction. To truly grasp this, forget modern notions of a chilly afternoon by a campfire. Between 26,000 and 19,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum turned the planet into an absolute wasteland. Colossal ice sheets crushed Europe, Asia, and North America. The landscape was a barren, frozen expanse, smashed by relentless Arctic gales, with barely a tree in sight. Edible vegetation vanished for months on end, and biologically, humans were completely outmatched. Born for warm savannas, our bodies hadn't caught up. No dense fur, no blubber like a seal, no ability to drop our heart rate and snooze through the freeze like a bear. Stripped bare in that environment, a human shuts down and perishes in hours. Meanwhile, local fauna were biological masterpieces designed for the cold. Mammoths possessed insulating wool and thick fat layers. Cave bears hibernated deep underground. Reindeer simply trekked south toward milder climates. Humans had missing biological gear across the board. On paper, we should have been wiped out immediately. Wrong body, wrong biome, worst conceivable odds. But we carried two secret weapons, a brain capable of foresight and hands capable of crafting what evolution failed to give us. That narrow edge was just barely enough. There was no single magic bullet. It took an entire stack of brilliant survival hacks, each fixing a bug in human biology that would have otherwise proven fatal. And it all kicked off with fire. Controlled by early humans for 300,000 to 400,000 years, fire was no longer a luxury by the Ice Age. It was life support, and they mastered it completely. Archaeologists unearthing Ice Age hearths in Ukraine didn't find crude ash piles. They uncovered engineered fireplaces, with one burning at a staggering 600 degrees Celsius, over 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. When timber ran dry on the windswept steppe, they burned animal bones and rendered fat instead. Fire gave them heat, cooked raw meat, tempered wooden tools, and bought precious daylight during dark winter months. But fire had one major flaw. You couldn't take it on the move. So our ancestors pulled off an unprecedented trick. They harvested the thermal armor of other creatures and wore it themselves. It started simply, draping raw pelts over their shoulders. In fact, butchered bear paw bones prove Northern Europeans were skinning cave bears as early as 300,000 years ago. Those bear hides formed tough, windproof capes, but draped hides leak body heat through every open gap. The true revolution came around 30,000 years ago with a ridiculously tiny tool, the eyed bone needle. Some archaeologists label the bone needle one of the greatest inventions in human history. And they're right. Needles allowed tailored clothing, sealed seams, multi-layered insulation, and fitted wrist cuffs. A loose blanket drapes. A tailored coat locks in heat. This tailoring edge may even have helped Homo sapiens outlast Neanderthals during the worst climate dips. They also crafted soft leather mittens, waterproof deerskin boots, and smeared raw animal fat, tallow, onto exposed skin, a gross but highly effective windbreaker. And across blinding snowfields, they faced another hidden killer: snow blindness. To combat the dazzling glare, hunters carved thin slits into strips of bone or wood, inventing the world's very first sunglasses tens of thousands of years before modern aviators. Forget the myth that ancient humans only cowered in dark caves. On the wood-starved plains of modern Ukraine and Russia, they built impressive architecture using the only abundant building material available: mammoth skeletons. At sites like Mezherik, humans constructed massive circular homes made almost entirely of mammoth bones and tusks, sinking skulls into the ground for foundations and arching tusks for roofs. Hundreds of giant bones formed a single dwelling, packed tight with soil, moss, and animal hides to lock out sub-zero winds. One specimen at Mezherik dates back 18,000 years to the absolute peak of the freeze. And the architecture was genius. They dug cold trap entryways lower than the main living floor. Heavy cold air sank into the entryway trench, leaving warm air trapped up where families slept. They also leveraged snow insulation, packing thick snowdrifts against walls to keep interior temps stable near freezing, even when exterior gales dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. They built near tree lines for windbreaks, sealed microdrafts with sticky pine sap, mud, and moss, and tackled the slow burn killer: winter starvation. They froze excess meat, smoked jerky, and dug underground permafrost storage pits. Archaeologists even found evidence of mammoth meat submerged in freezing ponds, creating natural underwater fridges that never lost power. They extracted every single calorie from every carcass, leaving zero waste. At sites like Salutray in France, organized hunting bands funneled wild horse herds into natural stone traps for tens of thousands of years, stocking up months of provisions before the first snowflake fell. They anticipated winter with extreme discipline, whereas modern humans get panicky the second the power grid flickers. We take electricity for granted and panic during winter blackouts. Our ancestors were never surprised. Preparation was their entire life strategy, and their ultimate survival tool was each other. Huddling closely in tight shelters wasn't just cozy. It was a literal thermodynamic strategy. Body heat shared among a group kept everyone alive. Isolation meant freezing to death. Yet this struggle wasn't always harmonious. Extreme famines forced some desperate bands into cannibalism just to survive the darkest months. Later in history, medieval peasants used the same heat principle by housing cows and livestock on the ground floor directly underneath their sleeping quarters, turning farm animals into living home heaters. You literally slept on top of a fur-covered furnace. In extreme cases, human bodies adapted genetically. The indigenous Yagan people of Tierra del Fuego lived near freezing waters with minimal clothing, surviving thanks to elevated metabolic rates and a compact squatting posture that minimized heat loss. They didn't rely on heavy coats. They turned their internal body engines up to maximum burn. And then comes the wild scientific theory. Could early hominins have survived winter by hibernating? At Spain's Cima de los Huesos, Pit of Bones, scientists analyzing 430,000-year-old fossil remains discovered deeply puzzling bone growth patterns. The bones showed periodic, cyclical damage mirroring metabolic arrest seen in hibernating animals, interrupted growth spurts, vitamin D deficiencies, and bone tissue being reabsorbed by the body during prolonged, dormant cave slumbers during brutal winters. While heavily debated in paleontology, the concept that human ancestors might have slowed their metabolic rates to sleep through the worst freezes remains a fascinating open question. Whether through hibernation or sheer engineering brilliance, making it to spring was never guaranteed. Every single winter was a life or death exam. The sheer scale of progress is mind-blowing. In a tiny fraction of evolutionary time, we went from stacking mammoth skulls against Arctic winds to adjusting our home heating with a phone tap. The deadliest threat in human history is now something we grumble about on the short walk to a preheated car.
We conquered winter so thoroughly that we completely forgot it was a war we almost lost.